tied up into it these days. And NASCAR drivers aren't going to come to Indianapolis if they can't find a good quality rod, and the same can be said for an IndyCar driver. They're not going to come run the 600 if they're not going to be a competitive team, and there just isn't enough seats. That's just what we know. There just isn't enough seats and good quality competitive rides. And, sure, let's just take Kurt Busch, for example, because I think he's a good one that we can talk about. First off, he said that he wants to do it. Secondly, he runs for Ganassi in the Cup Series, and, Ganassi could field another car in the IndyCar Series. But, at the end of the day, there's just a lot that goes in, and it's evolved into this, and I just think that it's just not money. It's just a lot of things, really, to be honest. I think timing is a concern. Quality rods are a concern. There's just too much. And let's just say that, and then if let's just say a NASCAR driver, for example, finishes on the podium, they got media availabilities that they're going to have to contend with, and there's just no way around that sometimes. And then, let's just say that they've done missed the start of the Coke 600. That's detrimental to them in the points. That's detrimental to them in a lot of different ways. And I just think it's just really hard for it to be done. I think it's really hard to get it done these days with timing concerns. I think there'd have to be some coordination between IndyCar and NASCAR to maybe doing something like that. And I think that's where, maybe we've heard where NASCAR has for a long time wanted to buy IndyCar. We know IndyCar is probably not for sale and isn't going to be sold. But aside from them buying IndyCar and being able to control it to some degree, I think they're just going to have to work together, and that's not something that NASCAR has done in the past. They've told their drivers they can go and do it, but you know the ramifications. It's the fact that if you get here late, you're going to the rear, or whatever the case is.
We're talking with Steve Wilson, editor-in-chief of Speedway Digest. Appreciate their partnership that they have with us to cover the Indianapolis 500. Out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway live, standing by is Matthew Embry, WSBT up in South Bend, our official IndyCar contributor. Matthew, what's going on at the track? Seems kind of quiet right now.
Well, right now they're going through, I think, last pre-qual inspection. I think in the next few minutes you will, around 10:30, I think you'll start seeing cars being pushed into the qualification line, with Connor Daly's car being first. Then they'll have the opening ceremonies, national anthem, and then at 11 a.m. they'll give final instructions to Connor, send him on his way, and we will get going. And should be a very interesting day. And with, again, an 80% chance of showers and thunderstorms tomorrow, I think that is going to see a lot of action, especially around that 33 position, because if we lose everything on Sunday, the field's set through that qualification run. If you're 34, 35, 36, you're going home.
Matthew, I'll be out there right after the show, and you and I will be doing some live Twitter feeds and some live Facebook feeds. I tell you what, it's going to be exciting, and we'll be out there tomorrow, and I'll be out there all week next week as we get geared up for the 103rd running of the Indianapolis 500. While we still got you guys, Matthew, do you have anything for Steve as far as NASCAR goes?
Steve, I think the right thing, and you hit on it right there, is what incentive does the NASCAR team owners have by allowing their driver to run there? Because unless they waive the rule where you miss the driver's meeting and you have to start in the back, there just is no incentive for a team owner to allow one of their drivers to do the double. I mean, they're at more of a loss than a gain, unless they're getting maybe a portion of the winnings, or, again, that is waived where they could keep their starting position for the 600. And then, of course, you have the concern after 500 miles, how much left does the driver have in the tank to not only go through a plane ride from Indy to Charlotte, but after that, all the nutrition, all that stuff to be able to handle 600 miles. Because we saw Tony Stewart literally fall flat on his face at the end of the 99 Coke 600, where he literally had to be pulled out of his car and put on a stretcher. So the incentive has to be there for the team owners in NASCAR to allow this to happen. And frankly, I just don't see anything where there's an incentive for them to allow their drivers to compete at Indy at this point. I think until there's that incentive, where it benefits them in the long run as well, I don't think you're going to see it.
No, I don't think you're going to see a top tier driver do it. You may have. I think you may see a driver that has nothing to lose do it, but again, those drivers that have nothing to lose sometimes are dependent upon their seats within the sport, and by them going off and doing something extracurricular may jeopardize that. I think you're right. I think there's not an incentive to do it, all around. But let's think about it on your side too. I mean, on the IndyCar side, what incentive is it for a NASCAR driver to come over there? I mean, if it's not somebody of name recognition, what incentive do they have to put them in a car?
My point exactly. You hit a nail on the head. I mean, it's got to be work out. It's got to make sense because, I mean, we've seen it with Fernando Alonso this week. I mean, they came in, blind on this, and now they're struggling just to make the field. I mean, it doesn't do a NASCAR driver good to do the double and then struggle. And then I think the perfect scenario is 95. Davy Jones was a full-timer in NASCAR, elected to do the double. He made the field for the Indy 500, but he failed to qualify for Charlotte. And 2 races later, he loses his NASCAR ride. So it's got to work out, and the incentives have got to be there. And like you said, on both sides of the coin, whether you're talking IndyCar to NASCAR or NASCAR to IndyCar, the incentives aren't there positively for either side of the coin at this point.
Steve, let's talk a little bit about this weekend's NASCAR race. Obviously, we want to get that in. It's qualifying weekend here at Indianapolis, so we got a lot to talk about with that. And then tomorrow is pole day, and the next week will be 2 hours. Our entire show is our annual special, the Field of 33. But this weekend at Charlotte, what are your thoughts? What are the things to look for? And just give us a recap of NASCAR. Of where we're at now.
Yeah, well, we're at the fact of Kyle Busch has won again in the Truck Series last night. He's won 5 straight there, but luckily he can't be entered in any more Truck Series events this year. So there's no more Kyle Busch going to victory lane in the Truck Series this year. So we don't have to talk about that anymore. Well, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. Qualifying for tonight's All-Star race. Clint Bowyer sitting on the pole tonight. For that one, I think it's going to be an interesting event. They've changed up the rules a little bit. We now have aero ducts that are running from the front valence on the cars up to the hood. This is supposed to produce better racing within the dirty air, as they say, throughout the field. Also, it's supposed to bring the temperatures of the engines down by a couple degrees with more airflow, and also give them a little bit more downforce in that front area of the car. So those are some things to look for tonight. There's been said that in the past we've used the All-Star race to test some things out. Some of the things that we used last year in the All-Star race have been put into this new package we're running this year. Some of the things we used last year were scrapped totally. So this is something that NASCAR is trying. Everything that they test, everything that they try, and they've used the All-Star race as kind of a test bed because there's no points involved into it, could potentially go into either next year's car or go into the Gen 7 car, which will debut in 2021. So it'll be, I think, tonight, if we can produce some closer racing, especially in the dirty air, which has plagued racing throughout the field and allowed the leaders to jump out to multiple second leads. I'm hoping that we can see some racing like we saw last week at Kansas. We saw racing throughout the entire field, and it was very close. It was very competitive, and if we can produce that at Charlotte and beyond, and these valence, these air ducts and the valences help produce that, then I'm all for it. But at least give it a shot tonight to see how it works out.
One of the drivers
race, Steve,
go ahead, Steve.
Would they ever consider bringing back possibly the field inversion from segment 1 to 2 as a possible way to induce more drama or more action potentially, or is that just a dead thing that we probably will never see again?
Well, we're changing the rules in the All-Star race almost every year, so, if they can do something to make it more fun, more competitive, I'm sure that they'll look at it. I've actually heard drivers say that they like the inversion. Kyle Larson has talked about various different things in his sprint car pass, in open wheel pass, short track, stuff like that, where they did do inversion. Now, I'm not saying he is in favor of doing it at the All-Star race, but there have been comments made about the inversion over the years since it was taken away, and will they bring it back? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know. We'll just see what they come up with next year.
Steve, one of the drivers I've been watching, and it just kind of seems like he's found his stride. It just kind of seems like he's found his way, if you will, and that's Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman is a driver that I feel like is going places in 2019 and definitely in 2020.
Well, the last 2 weeks he's finished runner-up. He seems like he's going to be the Stuart Friesen of the Cup Series that is run up front, led laps, but end up leading laps, and then end up at the end of the race in second place more than he is anywhere else. An interesting stat for Alex Bowman in his Cup Series career, he's finished in every single position in the field except for first. He led at Kansas, he led the week before, and he just hasn't been able to bring it home. Although, he is getting better. I think he is one of the stronger ones over at Hendrick Motorsports. There's a reason that Dale Jr. tapped him for that car and tapped him back when he had to get out the car a couple of years ago. There is talent in Alex Bowman. There's a lot of untapped talent in Alex Bowman, and he's very young. He has a long career ahead of him, and I think that his first year full time in the Cup Series, and even he had his ups and downs. He seemed to be brighter when he ran that limited series schedule for Dale Jr. in his place. A lot of people saw a lot of talent into him. And, last year, just, aside from sitting on, the outside pole at Daytona, it was very an up and down. I think, you could probably call it he wasn't a rookie, but I think you could consider it a typical rookie year where there's a lot of learning involved. But this year, I think he's figured it all out. And eventually, I'm sure he'll go to victory lane this year. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen at this point.
Final comments, Steve Wilson, Speedway Digest. I want to know, is Eric Jones officially off Clint Boyer's Christmas card list?
Maybe.
Talk with us a little bit about that. I mean, obviously we know about the end of the race at Kansas last week, and it's competitive racing. It is racing what it is, but certainly there was some tension to be had at the end of that race.
Yeah, Clint Boyer just felt that Eric Jones was just doing a little too much blocking there, although some of his teammates have said that, this is racing. I think Harvick said Tuesday night that when he looked back at this, that, he didn't really see anything necessarily wrong from this, that it was just racing. It was good, hard racing. And I think, I think these are things that as these cars continue to get closer and the competition is closer, we've not seen that in the past at a place like Kansas. We've seen the traditional conveyor belt of cars, and they've not really been that close together. And this is a product of what happens when cars are close together. We're going to see drivers blocking for position and making it extremely difficult to get around them. And I'm totally in favor of that. You know, if